You could have that post-traumatic growth of whatever you were experiencing by acknowledging this is not ideal, but it's the best I can do right now. Then you can have some of that post-traumatic growth of, okay, wow, I had this experience. It was awful. And now I'm past it and I can start thinking about ways to heal more effectively, how to move through suffering without, again, you don't want any of that self-depreciation. You don't want any of that guilt to linger on, or you don't even want to normalize it of like, oh, this is just what I do. I eat a donut when I'm stressed. You want to kind of separate yourself from, I am not this person. The person I am has bigger goals. It's just right now, this is the best I can do. And that's okay.
We've definitely, I know it was probably about 15 minutes ago at this stage, Rae, but you were going to get into practical strategies. I feel like with the way our conversation's gone, we've probably dipped into a bit of them. So if you have to repeat some things, that's perfectly okay. But my question for you is, what are some practical strategies for suffering effectively?
This is one of my favorite activities. I call it like a mini self-audit. And you can do this for literally any situation where you're suffering. So you can change it to like a work situation, a family situation, relationship, life, personal, whatever it is, you can use this technique. I encourage people to write these things down because there's lots of research on the power of writing, and it ingrains it a bit more effectively than typing or texting or even just saying or thinking it. By writing it down, you're really making it real. That's not super researchy, but that's the base of it. There are 4 questions that I like to ask for this mini life audit. The first one is, what are my top 3 core values? And if you don't know what core values are, you don't even know where to start. There are lots of websites. There are lots of resources that just list values, and you can kind of go through them. There are quizzes out there you can take, and they'll give you an idea of what's the most meaningful to you. Again, you don't have to be an expert on this stuff to just kind of figure out what are the top 3 core values that you have, these guiding posts in your life. The second question is, what's going well in life or situation or whatever it is? What is going well in this scenario? What do I like most about it? What do I hope continues? And writing those things down, really, even if it's something silly, again, it's a very personal experience. It's what do you like? Number 3 is, what do you not like? What is not going well? What is causing me to suffer? Why do I hate this? Why do I want to blame everybody? What is going on? What do I not want to continue? So writing those things down. And then the 4th step is envisioning this dream situation, this dream life, this dream job, this dream relationship, whatever it is. And then what are you doing? What's your contribution in this? Of like, how do you show up every day? And what's so great about it? Again, not from a societal standpoint. This is not anybody's vision but yours. So writing down those 4 steps. Once you have those 4 things written out, you look at it from, does number 3, what's going or what's not going well, does that conflict with number 1, your core values? And if it does, that's a completely separate issue. That's not something you can continue. That misalignment right there tells you the answer of how to move through suffering. You have to get out of that situation because it does not align with your core values, and you're not going to change your core values, but you can change the situation, especially if they're deal breakers. The next question you ask is, can you get some sort of version of your dream by staying the course? Because if you can, then again, that's readjusting your expectations, realigning to what is the current scenario, and I'm moving towards some version of my reality that I want, and that's okay. And then the last question I ask is, what are the things that are going well enough to motivate you through the challenges ahead? So if you've got a few things that you like, but a lot of things you don't, are those few things that you like strong enough to get you past the suffering or through this suffering? Are they are you willing to suffer for them? And that's when you assess your needs, you take action accordingly, and then you can help others if they come across a similar situation.
Really fascinating. I'm going to try and flip this and put this into the question section of the app for people on Noon Vibe and on our social media as well, because I think those questions are very valid. I can see 2 things. I can see number 1, writing them on paper allows you to just pull back slightly. You're still entrenched. It's still very much you, but it might allow you to see a small bit more objectively. The other thing was like, what if you make out, say, the list of things you don't like? And what if that is absolutely ginormous to the point you might be like, oh, what's the point? There's too much stuff here for me to... I'm just curious if you've ever experienced that, or how you could advise someone to not feel that sense of of overwhelm.
Absolutely. So that's another part of getting it out is once it's out, you don't have to hold space for it in you. It's out. This is all the truth right here. There's no hiding from it. It's not a secret. It's 6 pages worth of things that I absolutely am suffering through and I hate it. That's when you look at it as what would you have to change in order to feel more motivated, engaged, enthusiastic, or fulfilled? Again, it goes back to you. Suffering is something that we can control and we can change. And I'm not making light of that because some changes are very hard and sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. But if you have this long list of things that you absolutely hate and you're just feeling stuck, you're going to continue to have this long list and nothing is going to change if you don't change. You have to take control of some of those things.
Yeah, and kind of to my converse point on that too, I think if you ask anyone here in this conversation listening now, if you said, tell me something good about yourself, people might struggle. They might come out with one thing saying, oh, I'm funny, or I go to the gym, or I'm athletic. But if you ask someone to say, like, tell me something not so good about yourself, I think people can like rattle off, oh, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. So we tend to have like a negativity bias as well. Would you have any advice for people when it comes to listing out the good things, like how they can do that in a very kind of honest manner and maybe not be afraid to list them out as well? Like it's okay to be boastful, especially when you're doing this introspectively to yourself.
I think one, doing it often. The more frequently we do it, the more challenged we are by it, but the easier it is. Like we can start thinking broader the more frequently we do this. Because if you just keep coming to the paper and you have the same thing that's going well and nothing's ever adding to it, it doesn't feel very motivating to keep going. And it goes back to, well, now I have to change. I also want to emphasize, be kind to yourself. Like it's okay if you're just coming up with 50 negative things and one positive thing initially, that we're wired that way. Like we are wired towards the negative because it's what keeps us alive. It's what keeps us pushing towards more. Because if we were happy and content with everything all the time, there would be no progress. There would be no change. The lion coming toward us would not scare us. Like none of these things would keep us alive and well. So practicing that self-compassion, it's very cyclical. So if you're seeing like have a lot of negative stuff, practice self-compassion. That's okay. I'm okay. Then you start to find more positive stuff. And then again, you're going back, oh, I'm feeling really negative again. Practice that self-compassion. You'll find more positive stuff. And it just kind of keeps moving you forward inch by inch.
You've kind of mentioned as we're talking that suffering can be a catalyst for growth as well. And if I make a connection to a conversation recently I had with Dr. Andreas Michaelitis, who's the chief psychologist here at Noom as well, he mentioned, is it Yerkes-Dobson's law? So essentially it's in terms of arousal, but there's an optimal level of like arousal, or in this case, you could substitute it with stress. I'm sure you could substitute it with suffering as well. That there's kind of a little bit of suffering can be used advantageously, like to grow and develop. But if you're suffering too much, then you're in the realm of like anxiety and you're really struggling. Or if you're suffering too little, you're not being kind of, we'll say, like you're not under enough kind of stress or suffering to be able to move and grow, kind of to your point. Like we're constantly evolving, constantly developing, and maybe need it. Does that law apply to this aspect of suffering?
Absolutely. And again, very high level. I'm sure if we get into the nitty gritty, there's going to be some differences, but suffering, it's inevitable, just like stress. And you can have varying levels of it. But just like with stress, it's not the end of the story unless you just unpack and live there. And then you're not effectively suffering. You've just chosen to suffer. That's your choice. So suffering, again, we don't want it, but it's not something we can avoid. So accepting the fact that it is part of life and then knowing that it's coming, giving yourself some healthy coping techniques and knowing that you should care the most about your life. No one should care about you more than you do. You can't pour from that empty cup. Same with stress is like, if you're not consistently, even when you're not in, I'm all over the place here, when you're not in times of suffering, similar to when you're not in times of stress, you should be practicing techniques and self-care because you can't pour from an empty cup. And then when that stress or suffering comes, you will have been practicing these things the whole time. So by taking that regular inventory of what's going well, what you can improve, what you can control, what your ultimate goals are, you're really setting yourself up for success when you do come across suffering.